police constable was dismissed without notice and placed on the National Barred List. As police officer,
he wore a badge, took an oath, swore to protect the innocent. But behind the uniform, he was living a lie. For years he hid a double life, secret affairs, forbidden relationships, and a trail of betrayal no one saw coming, until one of his lovers uncovered the truth and exposed his lies with a single text message. Moments later, she was fighting for her life in a car park, and the man sworn to uphold the law was claiming it was self-defense. But was it really? Or had the protector just become the predator? Because sometimes, the most dangerous criminals are the ones who wear the badge. This is the story of Timothy Brehmer and Claire Parry, a story of double lives, hidden secrets, and a deadly confrontation behind the badge. You're watching True Crime Wound, where we uncover the dark truths hidden behind love, lies, and betrayal. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you the stories that shock, haunt, and reveal the devastating consequences when trust is shattered. Today's case: a police officer, a decade-long affair, and a moment of violence that ended in death. But the real question isn't what happened in that car park, it's why. And the answer will shock you. Timothy Keith Brehmer was born in Zimbabwe and raised in Hampshire by his mother and stepfather. He grew up in Andover in North Hampshire, a quiet corner of southern England. In 2003, at the age of 24, he joined Dorset Police. Brehmer seemed dependable. Colleagues described him as charming, personable, charismatic. One fellow officer who mentored under him said, "The first thing that struck me about Tim was how personable he was in dealing with members of the public." He started his career working in Bournemouth. By 2010, he'd joined the Roads Policing Unit. By 2020, he'd been seconded to the National Police Air Service at Bournemouth Airport, where he operated the helicopter's camera and assisted with navigation. He was good at his job, trusted, respected. In 2003, the same year he joined the force, Brehmer met Martha, a fellow Dorset police officer. She worked as a detective, smart, driven, committed to her career. They started dating, and the relationship seemed solid. Martha believed she'd found a partner she could trust, someone who understood the demands of police work, someone who shared her values. They married 3 years later, in 2006. By 2020, they had a 9-year-old son together. They lived in Hordle, in the New Forest area of Hampshire. To anyone looking in from the outside, they had it all: stable jobs, a beautiful home, a young child. The perfect image of a police family built on mutual respect and shared purpose. But marriages, even those that look perfect, can hide fractures beneath the surface. Martha was dedicated to her work. Long hours, late nights, the kind of commitment that comes with being a detective. And while she trusted her husband, while she believed in their partnership, she didn't know the truth. Timothy Brehmer wasn't the man she thought he was. Behind that image, cracks. Deep, dangerous cracks. Because Timothy Brehmer wasn't faithful, he wasn't honest, and he certainly wasn't the dependable family man he pretended to be. He was a serial womanizer. Colleagues within Dorset Police allegedly knew him as someone who preyed on vulnerable emergency workers. He used charm and manipulation to draw women in. One detective would later call him Mr. Smooth. Another would label him a sexual predator. But in 2009, Brehmer didn't just have a casual fling. He began something deeper, something more complicated. He began an affair with Claire Parry, and it would last for more than a decade. Claire Parry was born on December 19th, 1978. She grew up in Bournemouth, Dorset, and dedicated her life to caring for others. She trained as a nurse practitioner and built a career spanning over 2 decades. By 2018, she was working at Moordown Medical Center, a respected practice in her community. Her colleagues admired her. Her patients trusted her. She was the kind of person who gave everything to her work. She was married to Andrew Parry, also a police officer with Dorset Police. They had 2 children together, a family, a life. But like many marriages, theirs wasn't perfect. Andrew and Claire's relationship had begun to fray over the years. The long hours, the stress of police work, the emotional distance that creeps into a marriage when both partners are stretched too thin. By the late 2000s, they were struggling. They'd tried to make it work, counseling, conversations, promises to do better. But the cracks kept widening. Claire felt lonely, disconnected. She wanted to feel valued again, to feel seen. And somewhere in that vulnerability, she met Timothy Brehmer. It's unclear exactly how their affair began. Maybe it was at a police social event. Maybe it was through mutual friends in the force. But somewhere around 2010, Claire Parry and Timothy Brehmer crossed a line. At first, it might have felt like an escape. Brehmer had a way of making women feel special. One of his former lovers would later say, "He scooped me up, put me on a total pedestal." He was charming, attentive. He listened. He made promises. For Claire, the affair may have filled the void her marriage couldn't. Maybe she thought Brehmer would leave his wife. Maybe she believed their connection was real. Maybe she convinced herself it was love. But as the years passed, the truth became harder to ignore. The affair stretched across more than a decade. 10 years of stolen moments, 10 years of lies to their spouses, 10 years of Brehmer promising Claire a future that never came. Because Brehmer had no intention of leaving Martha. He liked his double life. The thrill, the control, the ability to compartmentalize his deception. And Claire? She wasn't the only one. By early 2020, Claire's marriage to Andrew had deteriorated beyond repair. They'd been sleeping in separate beds for months. They'd tried counseling again, but it hadn't worked. Andrew had decided to leave her in March 2020. But COVID-19 lockdown restrictions had thrown everything into chaos. They were stuck living together, trapped in a dying marriage, waiting for the world to open up again so they could finally move on. And during this time, Claire's suspicions about Brehmer began to grow. She'd spent 10 years believing she was special to him, that their affair meant something. But now she was starting to wonder, was she the only one? On May 6th, 2020, Brehmer visited Claire at her home while supposedly at work. They were intimate. But that evening something shifted in Claire. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the way he'd been distant lately. But she needed to know the truth. Using a fake Facebook profile under the name Louisa Morgan, Claire began digging into Brehmer's past. She searched for other women, and she found them. She discovered Kate Rhodes, a detective constable with Dorset Police. Rhodes had unknowingly had an affair with Brehmer between 2011 and 2012. She'd ended it when she realized he was married. Claire reached out to her. The 2 women compared notes. They realized Brehmer had been juggling multiple affairs throughout his marriage. Claire wasn't special. She was just one name on a list. Rhodes described him as a manipulator. "He scooped me up, put me on a total pedestal, then broke me down again," she wrote. Claire replied, "He is a total shit. He promised me the world, then let me down." By the evening of May 6th, Claire had reached a breaking point. She knew the truth now, and she was done being lied to. For the next 2 days, Claire messaged Brehmer relentlessly, demanding answers, demanding honesty. And Brehmer? He felt trapped. On May 9th, he would make a decision that would end Claire's life. The Horns Inn sits on Christchurch Road in West Parley, a quiet village on the outskirts of Bournemouth. Its car park backs onto residential homes. It's the kind of place where nothing terrible is supposed to happen. But on that sunny Saturday afternoon, it became a crime scene. On May 9th, Brehmer told his wife Martha he was going to work to collect steaks for a family barbecue. It was a lie. He did go to work briefly, but only so his alibi would check out if Martha called. At 2:31 p.m., he arrived at the Horns Inn car park. At 2:44 p.m., Claire Parry arrived. They parked their cars away from the CCTV cameras. Deliberately, away from prying eyes. Claire got out of her car and climbed into the passenger seat of Brehmer's silver Citroën C1. Inside that car, the confrontation began. Claire was angry. She'd spent days uncovering his lies. She'd discovered his other affairs. She knew he'd been playing her for a decade, and now she wanted control. She wanted him to feel the consequences. She asked for his phone. Brehmer hesitated, but he handed it over. Claire opened his messages. She scrolled until she found his wife's contact, and then she typed 4 words. "I am cheating on you." She pressed send. The message went through at approximately 2:47 p.m., and everything changed. What happened in the next moments would be disputed later, but witnesses nearby heard the escalation. At approximately 3 p.m., a neighbor living near the car park heard shouting. A female voice, a male voice, arguing. Around 3:15 p.m., the shouting intensified. The car horn blared 2 or 3 times, sharp, desperate. Then silence. Whatever happened inside that Citroën was brutal, fast, irreversible. At 3:26 p.m., Brehmer walked to the entrance of the car park. His shirt was bloody. His demeanor was strange, frantic, but controlled. He flagged down witnesses. "She stabbed me," he told them. He showed them blood on his shirt. He acted distraught. One witness asked, "Where is she?" Brehmer pointed toward the car. "She's in there. She attacked me. I don't know what happened." But something felt off. The witnesses couldn't quite put their finger on it, but Brehmer's behavior seemed rehearsed, calculated. Paramedics arrived at 3:39 p.m. They rushed toward the silver Citroën. What they found inside was horrifying. Claire Parry was hanging half out of the passenger door, her body limp, not breathing, no pulse. Paramedics immediately began CPR. They worked desperately to revive her. But her injuries were severe, life-threatening. Brehmer was arrested on the spot in the back of an ambulance. He maintained his story. She'd stabbed him. It was self-defense. He'd been trying to protect himself. It was all a terrible accident. But when police searched the scene, they found something that didn't match his story. There was no knife. Not Claire's, anyway. Claire Parry was rushed to Royal Bournemouth Hospital. Doctors worked through the night to save her. But the damage was catastrophic. Her brain had been starved of oxygen for too long. At 9:37 a.m. on May 10, 2020, Claire Parry was pronounced dead. A mother of 2. A nurse who'd dedicated her life to saving others. Dead at 41, and the man who claimed he'd been defending himself. The man who said it was all an accident. He was now facing a murder charge, but as investigators began piecing together the evidence, they would discover that Timothy Brehmer's story didn't just have holes in it. It was a complete fabrication. And the truth of what happened inside that car was far darker than anyone could have imagined. On May 11, 2020, Timothy Brehmer was formally charged with murder. He appeared via video link at Poole Magistrates Court the following day, May 12th. He was remanded in custody, and as the investigation deepened, detectives from Dorset Police's Major Crime Investigation Team began piecing together the truth. It didn't take long for Brehmer's story to unravel. First, investigators examined the scene. Brehmer had claimed Claire stabbed him, that she'd attacked him with a knife, that he'd been defending himself. But when forensic teams combed through the car, they found no knife belonging to Claire. None in her car, none in her bag, nothing. Instead, they discovered something damning. Brehmer had used his own penknife to inflict the wounds on his arm. He'd stabbed himself, staged the entire scene to make it look like Claire had attacked him first. It was premeditated deception, a calculated cover-up. Then there was his phone. Investigators discovered that Brehmer had conducted a factory reset on his mobile telephone shortly after the incident. He'd wiped it clean, deleted messages, call logs, everything. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence, and it worked to an extent. Police were left with an incomplete picture of the hours leading up to Claire's death, but the most damning evidence came from the post-mortem examination. Dr. Basil Perdue, the pathologist, concluded that Claire Parry died from a brain injury caused by compression of her neck, and the injuries were severe. 3 bones in her neck were fractured: the hyoid bone, the thyroid cartilage, fractures that required significant sustained force. Brehmer had strangled her, not accidentally, not in a brief moment of panic. He had applied sustained pressure to her neck with his forearm or the crook of his elbow for 10 to 30 seconds, long enough to break bones, long enough to render her unconscious, long enough to cause catastrophic brain damage, and after she went limp, he didn't call for help, he didn't perform CPR, he didn't check her pulse. Instead, he walked away. He staged the scene, he fabricated a story, and he let her die. In July 2020, Brehmer pleaded guilty to manslaughter at a trial and preparation hearing. He admitted causing Claire's death, but he denied murder. His defense? He claimed he'd lost control, that he never intended to kill her or cause serious harm. He said he'd only wanted to push her out of the car so he could drive away and kill himself, that his arm had accidentally caught her neck. The prosecution rejected his plea. They wanted a trial. They wanted a murder conviction. The trial began on October 19, 2020, at Salisbury Crown Court. Richard Smith, QC, led the prosecution. Joanna Martin, QC, now KC, defended Brehmer. The Crown's case was clear. Brehmer had deliberately strangled Claire Parry to death. When she sent that text message to his wife, he lost control, not in a moment of desperation, but in a calculated act of rage and domination. The prosecution argued that Brehmer couldn't allow Claire to destroy his life, his marriage, his reputation, his career. So he silenced her, permanently. The defense argued differently. Martin painted Brehmer as a desperate man who'd been backed into a corner. She claimed he'd been suicidal, that Claire's actions had triggered a mental breakdown, that everything that followed was a tragic accident. Under cross-examination, Brehmer was forced to confront his lies. Smith pressed him. "You're a well-practiced liar, aren't you?" Brehmer initially denied it, but when Smith reminded him of the decade of lies he told his wife, his lovers, his colleagues, Brehmer finally admitted, "I lied consistently well." Smith asked if he was a devious bastard. Brehmer replied, "That's how I consider myself now." The jury heard from Kate Rhodes, the detective who'd also had an affair with Brehmer. She described him as Mr. Smooth, a manipulator who groomed vulnerable women. They heard from forensic experts who explained the mechanics of strangulation. To break 3 bones in someone's neck requires sustained, deliberate pressure. This wasn't a brief struggle. This was intentional. On October 27, 2020, after just under 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: not guilty of murder, guilty of manslaughter. The courtroom erupted. Claire's family was devastated. How could a man who strangled a woman with enough force to break her neck, who then lied to cover it up, who let her die without trying to save her, how could that man not be guilty of murder? The following day, October 28th, Brehmer was sentenced to 10 years and 6 months in prison. But the story didn't end there. Public outcry over the sentence was swift. Victims' advocates argued it was too lenient. The Attorney General's office agreed. They referred the case to the Court of Appeal under the unduly lenient sentence scheme. On March 19, 2021, the Court of Appeal increased Brehmer's sentence to 13 years and 6 months. It still wasn't enough for Claire's family. But it was a small acknowledgement that justice, however imperfect, had been served. In the days following Brehmer's conviction, Dorset police moved swiftly. On September 16, 2020, before he was even sentenced, Brehmer was dismissed from the force following a misconduct hearing. He was placed on the National Police Barred List by the College of Policing. He would never wear a badge again. The police force he'd served for 17 years issued a statement. Detective Chief Inspector Richard Dixie said, Timothy Brehmer's criminal actions on Saturday, May 9, 2020, have had a devastating impact on a number of people, particularly the family of Claire Parry and her loved ones. But for Claire's family, no statement could undo the damage. Andrew's words echoed the frustration felt by many. How does a police officer, someone trained to save lives, stand by and watch someone die? The broader implications of the case sparked national debate. Women's rights organizations highlighted the systemic failures in how the justice system treats male violence against women. The Center for Women's Justice pointed out that women who kill abusive partners often receive life sentences for murder, even when acting in self-defense. Yet Brehmer, who strangled Claire with deliberate force, received just over a decade. Claire's story became part of a larger conversation about coercive control, domestic violence, and the ways men use power to dominate and destroy. She was 41 years old, a mother, a nurse, a woman who spent her life caring for others, and she died at the hands of a man who swore an oath to protect. He wore the badge with pride. But it couldn't hide the darkness he carried inside. Thank you for watching this episode of True Crime Wound. Claire Parry's story is a heartbreaking reminder that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. If this case touched you, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. Every week we expose the dark truths hidden behind love, betrayal, and the badge. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. And remember, justice may be imperfect, but the truth always deserves to be told. Until next time.